The vast amphitheater fell silent as Chancellor Tenmore of the hegemony called the emergency session to order. The chamber itself was a monument to technological supremacy. Exposed circuit boards formed intricate patterns along the walls. Glowing data conduits snaked across the ceiling like electronic arteries, and massive processing cores hummed with barely contained computational power. Representatives from 47 species filled the curved seating arrangements, their various forms of communication chittering, harmonious tones, electromagnetic pulses, and bioluminescent displays, creating a cacophony of anxiety that the universal translators struggled to parse. High Counselor Mepper, the insectoid delegate from the Ment Collective, raised her serrated forelimbs for attention. Honored colleagues, in my 1,000 cycles of service to this council, I have never witnessed such uniform terror among our observer corps. The reports flooding in from across fresh space paint a picture that defies rational explanation. At the center of the amphitheater, a massive holographic display activated, its projectors emerging from arrays of exposed processors that lined the floor. The display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, each data point calculated in real time by the room's distributed computing matrix. Red markers indicated known fresh military positions. As the assembled delegates watched, those markers began disappearing in rapid succession, not scattered randomly, but in carefully coordinated waves across hundreds of systems simultaneously. In the span of 72 standard hours, Chancellor Tenmore announced, his voice amplified through the chamber's quantum acoustic processors, the Fresh Imperium, the most technologically advanced military force in recorded galactic history, has ceased to exist as a functioning entity. The chamber erupted in a dozen different forms of dismay, the emotional responses causing fluctuations in the room's electromagnetic fields as sensitive circuits automatically adjusted their outputs. Ambassador Quillen of the Verdant Systems, her plant-like tendrils writhing with agitation, emitted a series of chemical pheromones that the translator's biochemical sensors rendered as impossible. The Fress had 12,000 capital ships. Their defensive networks were impenetrable. Emphasized Senator Cadex Prime, the mechanical representative of the Synthetic Confederation. His optical sensors focused on the holographic display. Analysis of available data indicates that human forces achieved a 97.3% success rate across all documented engagements. This level of tactical supremacy against a superior force is, statistically, unprecedented. Admiral Tortek of the Aquarian Federation, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of extreme distress in his species, spoke through his water-filled environment suit. My own naval attaché was aboard the Fresh Dreadnought Eternal Triumph when the humans attacked. His final transmission described human warriors cutting through energy barriers with archaic bladed weapons. We have corroborating reports from 17 different observer missions, added Counselor Erith Vane of the Telepathic Collective, her mental emanations carrying undertones of barely controlled fear. The humans have developed some form of enhanced primitive weaponry that renders conventional defensive systems obsolete. Prime Minister Gorvok of the Orsaned Republics, a massive bear-like creature whose species had historically prided itself on physical prowess, slammed his clawed fist against his speaking podium. Primitive? Primitive? I've reviewed the tactical footage. These human melee marines moved through fresh defensive positions like apex predators through prey herds. There was nothing primitive about their execution. The holographic display shifted, showing compiled footage from multiple observers' sources. The assembled delegates watched in horrified fascination as human boarding parties, clad in armor that seemed to absorb energy weapon fire, methodically dismantled fresh defenses with weapons that looked like they belonged in a museum. The psychological impact cannot be understated, observed Dr. Thrillax-9, the hive mind representative whose species had spent millennia studying warfare as an academic pursuit. The Fress were not merely defeated, they were demoralized. Their fundamental understanding of combat superiority was shattered by opponents using tools their ancestors might have recognized. Chancellor Tenmore gestured, and the display zoomed in on a specific engagement. This footage comes from General Elionis of the Jorphakane War College, who observed the capture of the Fresh command vessel Dominion's Edge. Note the precision of the human assault, the complete neutralization of energy-based defenses, and the systematic capture of Fresh personnel. Ambassador Quillen's tendrils had turned a pale shade that indicated deep unease. If the humans can defeat the Fresh so completely, what does this mean for the rest of us? Are we all vulnerable to these sword-wielding warriors? That, declared High Counselor Mepper, is precisely why we are here. We must assess whether humanity represents a new galactic threat or something else entirely. The Chamber's attention turned to diplomat Mirsharf of the Verdani Commonwealth, whose thick fur rippled with nervous energy as he shifted his weight between his powerful legs. My people have had limited contact with humanity through trade negotiations. Their representatives spoke frequently of concepts we found alien. Protection of the weak, sacrifice for strangers, universal rights to self-determination. Propaganda, growled General Vorthak Prime of the militant orders, his cybernetic enhancements gleaming. No species gains this level of military supremacy without conquest as their ultimate goal. The humans are simply more sophisticated in their approach. Are they? Challenged Minister Zealith of the Pacifist Alliance, her bioluminescent patches flickering in complex patterns. According to refugee reports from liberated worlds, the humans are offering protection, not demanding submission. They're establishing what they call sanctuary zones, areas where any species can seek refuge from aggression. Senator Cadix Prime's mechanical form whirred as he processed additional data. Analyzing human communication intercepts and public statements suggests that their stated goals align with their observed actions. They appear to be building a protective network rather than an empire. The implications of this statement sent ripples of confusion through the assembly. Grand Matron Yosara of the Dominion Hives, her antennae twitching rapidly, spoke for many. A species achieves unprecedented military dominance and uses it to protect others. This behavioral pattern has no precedent in our historical databases. Perhaps, suggested Admiral Tortek, that is precisely what makes them so dangerous. We understand conquest. We understand territorial expansion. We understand resource competition. But altruistic military supremacy? How do you negotiate with a species that fights not for gain but for principles? The Chamber's vast array of monitoring systems detected the rising stress levels among the delegates, automatically adjusting atmospheric composition and electromagnetic dampening to maintain optimal conditions. The irony was not lost on the more observant representatives. Here they sat, surrounded by the pinnacle of technological achievement, discussing their collective terror of an enemy that fought with swords. Chancellor Tenmore spoke again. I have reviewed the complete tactical analyses from our observer corps. The humans have not simply developed new weapons, they have revolutionized the fundamental nature of warfare. They have proven that technological superiority can be overcome by tactical innovation, psychological warfare, and, he paused, seeming to struggle with the concept, absolute commitment to their stated values. High Counselor Mepper raised her forelimbs again. The question before this council is simple. Do we treat humanity as a threat to be contained or as a potential ally to be courted? Alliance, said Diplomat Mirsharf immediately, his fur standing on end. Any species capable of this level of military coordination while maintaining moral constraints could be invaluable in maintaining galactic stability. Containment, countered General Vorthak Prime just as quickly. Today they fight for noble causes. Tomorrow they may decide that our species are the ones who need to be protected against. better to establish limitations on their expansion now. Ambassador Quillen's chemical emissions now carried notes that the translators interpreted as deep concern. Has anyone considered that we may not have a choice in the matter? If the humans can defeat the Fresh this completely, what makes us think we could contain them if they chose to resist? The uncomfortable truth of this observation settled over the assembly like a system-wide power failure. The Galactic Council, for all its technological supremacy and computational power, had never faced a species that combined overwhelming military capability with genuinely altruistic motivations. Prime Minister Gorvak leaned back in his reinforced chair, its integrated systems automatically adjusting to his stress indicators. I fought the Fresh in the Outer Rim conflicts. They were ruthless, efficient, and technologically superior to anything we could field. Their ships were floating computers, their soldiers walking circuit boards. If the humans can neutralize them this thoroughly with metal blades and projectile weapons, then we're dealing with a paradigm shift that makes all our technological advancement obsolete. The real concern, added Dr. Thrillix-9, is that the humans appear to have achieved this victory through innovation rather than raw technological advancement. They identified weaknesses in modern military doctrine that no one else had considered. What other primitive solutions might they develop for future conflicts? Minister Zelith's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what her species used to indicate profound uncertainty. We're operating on the assumption that the humans will continue to adhere to their stated peaceful intentions, but what happens if they change their minds? What if they decide that some species are too dangerous to be allowed self-determination? The question hung in the air like a sword over the assembly. Chancellor Tenmore studied the faces and equivalent features of the delegates around him before speaking. I propose that we approach this situation with both caution and opportunity in mind. The humans have demonstrated unprecedented military capability, but their actions thus far suggest they may be genuine in their protective rather than aggressive intentions. He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed the current galactic political map, its data streams updating in real time through quantum entanglement networks. The Fresh Empire is gone. In its place, we have emerging sanctuary zones under human protection, refugee settlements being established for displaced populations, and former Fresh military assets being repurposed for humanitarian missions. High Admiral Tortek's eyes blinked in rapid sequence. You're suggesting we work with them. I'm suggesting we don't make the Fresh mistake of underestimating them, Tenmore replied. The humans have proven that they can dismantle any conventional military force in the galaxy. They've also proven that they use this capability in service of protecting the innocent rather than expanding their own power. Perhaps it's time we acknowledge that the galaxy has a new dominant species, and that species appears to be surprisingly benevolent. Senator Cardex Prime processed this statement. Recommendation: immediate diplomatic overtures to human leadership. Proposal: formal recognition of sanctuary zones. Addendum: joint task force to establish communication protocols and mutual defense agreements. Second, said Diplomat Mersharf immediately, his thick fur settling into calmer patterns. Thirded, added Ambassador Quillen, her tendrils having returned to a more natural color. General Vorthak Prime's cybernetic components sparked with what might have been frustration. You're all afraid of them. Yes, admitted High Counselor Mepper without shame. But perhaps fear is the beginning of wisdom in this case. The humans have swords that can cut through energy shields, armor that can absorb plasma fire, and a willingness to sacrifice everything for complete strangers. That combination makes them either the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced or its greatest hope. Chancellor Tenmore called for a formal vote. All in favor of establishing immediate diplomatic contact with human leadership with the goal of formal alliance and mutual recognition. The vote was closer than many expected, but the result was clear. 31 species in favor, 12 opposed, 4 abstentions. Motion carried, Tenmore announced. May our donjoris, the eternal light, the great current, and all our various deities help us navigate this new reality. As the session adjourned, delegates began clustering in small groups, their various forms of communication creating interference patterns across the chamber's sensitive electronic arrays. The galaxy had changed in 72 hours. An empire that had stood for centuries was gone, replaced by something unprecedented. A human-led protectorate that wielded swords against starships and somehow made it work. In the observation galleries above the main chamber, intelligence analysts from a dozen species frantically transmitted reports to their respective governments through encrypted quantum channels. The age of conventional warfare was over. The age of human military doctrine had begun. And somewhere in human space, melee Marines were sharpening their swords while surrounded by civilizations that worshipped technology. The galaxy would never be the same. In the days that followed the council session, secure communications networks across the galaxy buzzed with frantic activity. Military strategists attempted to comprehend tactics that seemed to defy logic. Intelligence agencies scrambled to gather information about human military capabilities. Diplomatic corps prepared for the most challenging negotiations in galactic history. The human response to the Council's overtures was swift and surprisingly straightforward. Rather than complex political maneuvering or territorial demands, humanity simply requested meetings to discuss mutual protection protocols and refugee assistance coordination. Their diplomatic language was refreshingly direct, compared to the elaborate ceremonial communications most species employed. Within a standard month, the first Joint Human Council Task Force was established. The humans arrived at the neutral meeting station aboard ships that looked remarkably similar to captured Fress vessels, because, as it turned out, many of them were exactly that. Former instruments of oppression now flying under human colors, their weapon systems reconfigured for defense rather than conquest. The human delegation was led by Admiral Sarah Chen, one of the architects of Liberation Day. She wore a dress uniform rather than combat armor, but every alien diplomat present could sense the controlled lethality that marked her as one of the feared melee Marines. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of absolute conviction. "We're not interested in ruling anyone," she said during the opening session. "We're interested in making sure no one rules anyone else through force. The galaxy is big enough for all of us to coexist peacefully." The simplicity of the statement was both reassuring and terrifying. Here was a species that had just proven it could conquer the galaxy, and it genuinely seemed to have no interest in doing so. For civilizations that had spent millennia maneuvering for advantage and territory, the concept was almost incomprehensible. As the months passed, the sanctuary zones expanded. Former Fress worlds were rebuilt under human protection. Refugee populations found new homes. Conflicts that had raged for decades were resolved through human mediation, backed by the implicit threat of melee Marine intervention for those who refused to negotiate in good faith. The technological civilizations of the galaxy slowly began to adapt to this new reality. Military doctrines were rewritten to account for low-tech threats. Personal shielding systems were redesigned to handle slow-moving projectiles. Combat training programs began including instruction in hand-to-hand fighting skills that had been considered obsolete for centuries. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The human approach to warfare, using overwhelming force in service of protection rather than conquest, gradually began to influence other species' thinking about conflict resolution. The idea that strength could be used to shield the weak rather than exploit them spread through diplomatic channels like a virus, fundamentally altering the galaxy's approach to military power. The circuits and data streams that covered every surface of the council chambers continued to hum with activity, processing the constant flow of information from across the galaxy. But now, Mixed in with reports of trade disputes and territorial negotiations came stories of rescued civilians, protected colonies, and conflicts resolved through human intervention. The galaxy had indeed changed. Technology still mattered, but it no longer determined the outcome of every conflict. In the endless complexity of interstellar politics, sometimes the simplest solution was also the most effective. Sometimes bringing a sword to a gunfight wasn't just viable, it was revolutionary. The humans had proven that the most advanced weapons in the galaxy were no match for enhanced primitive technology wielded by warriors who genuinely cared about protecting others. As the circuit-covered walls of the council chambers displayed data from across their newly peaceful galaxy, one truth had become undeniable. The age of technological supremacy was over. The age of human protection had begun. Many thanks to my channel members and Pathfinders. You all make these videos possible. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Video shares, memberships, and super thanks help the channel grow as well, so feel free to partner with this channel in that way as we grow. With that all said, thank you again for listening to the story, and thank you for your time. On the left side of your screen are some videos I think you might be interested in. I hope to see you in the next one.